Here we go. I think we're ready. Biblical understanding of family and work. Nice. Okay. Last question is, share with them when you think about your relationship with your parents, okay? Think about that. What image or memories or thoughts pop into your head right now? Ready, set, share. When you think about your parents and your relationship with them, what image or memory or idea pops up immediately? Ready, share. Okay? What words, images, memories, food, whatever it may be, pop into your head? Okay. All right. So I don't know if you shared good things or bad things or whatever it was you shared, but all of us have some kind of memory or connection with our parents, right? So if you think about it, last week was about marriage, right? Today is about family and work. And if you think about it, like marriage, family, and work, those are the three biggest places that you have relationships. That's the biggest place that takes your time and energy, right? Like if you're at school, school is your work, okay? So like school, being at home with your family, that takes up the majority of your mental, emotional, physical energy and time, right? Like those are important relationships. And God is saying here, he's like, look, I saved you, I made you new so that you could live a different kind of life. And here it is. This is what a different kind of life looks like last week with marriage, and this week with family, parent-child relationships, and work. Because he's saying, I don't want you just to be saved and live this like bound up life where you're just like repeating these old habits and patterns. He's saying, I saved you, made you new, so that I could give you a new way of living. And you can see that especially with your family first. So in this section, we're going over just 9 verses today. It's not very much, but it's 2 sections. The first one is about family. Second one's about work, okay? So look at Ephesians 6, verse 1. Let's look at that. And it says right here, I don't know if it's up on the screen. It might not be working today, but it says this. Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Ephesians 6, verse 1. So if you could sum up, so in this room, nobody is a parent yet, okay? But all of you have a parent, right? At least one parent. All of you have a parent in your life, okay? Let me tell you, who's ever said, whenever, if ever, I have kids, I will never do X, Y, Z like my parents did to me? Who has thought that? Probably most of you in this room, okay? Let me tell you, as the only one in this room who's a parent, okay? You will probably do the things you said you would never do, okay? So if I could sum up parenting in like 2 words, my son right now is 5, okay? So I think 5 is where real parenting starts because as all of you guys have known lately, my child, real sassy, right? He's real sassy. He's figuring out who he is and what he wants and what he thinks, and he's not afraid to tell you about it, okay? Which is a good thing developmentally, but it's also stressful for me as a parent, okay? But parenting is in these 2 words, okay? Parenting is all about these 2 words. Do you know what they are? Think about it. What do you think it is? Don't tell me. But it's these 2 words. Parenting is all about love and teaching obedience. That's what parenting is about, at least with the stage I'm in, okay? Love and obedience. And those 2 things, like a coin. If you have a quarter, which most of you guys don't nowadays, but there's heads and there's tails, right? There's like 2 sides, same coin. Love and obedience are 2 sides, the same coin. So do you guys know what the most important years of your life are? Guess. Most important years of your life. They say, psychologists say these are the most important years of your life. Nicole's thinking back through her child psychology class. Most important years of your life are 0 to 6. Those are technically the most important years. So all of you guys have passed those years, okay? Because you're all past 6. 0 to 6, they say, is the most important years of your development because you are a blank slate. So whatever is built in those first 6 years of your life, that's your framework to understand the entire world, okay? So for example, you see kiddos who are neglected, right? Like they've either been abandoned or they don't have any care in their lives. those first 6 years, if there's actually, I didn't pull this up, which I'm sad about, but they did a brain image of a 3-year-old, okay? And they, like brain image this way, okay? And so they did a brain image, and a regular 3-year-old's head was like this size, and the brain was like this size, and everything looks good, okay? And they did a picture of another 3-year-old kid who was neglected for 3 years. And do you know the difference in the brain? It was like shrunken to 2/3 of the size of the other kid. Like literally their brain capacity is smaller because of neglect and not getting love and attention. Like that's how important the early years of a child's life is. And so the reason for that is because that especially that first year, okay, I don't expect, so I'm pregnant, right? I'm gonna have a baby in June. When I have this baby, I don't expect this baby to come out and be fully obedient. That would be great, but that's not gonna happen, okay? But what does that child need the first year of this child's life? What does the child need? Do you guys know what a child needs? What does a child need? Okay, they need sustenance. They need food. What do they need though? They need to know that they are loved. So like if that baby's crying and I'm like, screw that kid, it's over. I don't care. Toss her out. If I did that, would that mess her up? Yes. She would be in therapy for life because of me, okay? But the point being is, when I give her that milk, that food that she needs, when I give her the attention, what am I showing her? That I love her, that I see her, that her needs are met, that she can trust that I will meet her needs. For all of us are past 1 year old, right? But that's what you learn in that first year of your life, that you are seen, you are important, you can trust the person who's supposed to take care of you. Now, if that doesn't happen well, that becomes a very kind of messed up foundation that we then build our life on, and it's really hard from there. But is it fixable? Absolutely. But you have to know that. That's where it starts. After that kid hits a year, what am I teaching that kid? You will be surprised how quickly kids learn the first word. What's often their first word? What do you think Jisung's first word was? Actually, I remember what it was. It was dad. But besides that, what's one of the earliest words they learn? It's 2 letters. Starts with an N. No. One of the first. I swear to the good Lord, I do not teach a kid no. I teach him I have a video. He goes, Abba. I'm like, oh my gosh, I gave birth to you. I raised you. But one of the first words he learned was no. You'll be no. Okay, say no. Ready? 1, 2, 3. No. Okay, say yes. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Do you notice though on your tongue it's harder to say yes than it is to say no? No is really easy to say. Okay. Kids, they know how to say no so fast. Okay. Do I have to teach my child how to be selfish? No. Or steal things? This week, side story. This is just a side story. My kid loves apples. So in the morning, I cut apples this week, and there was 4 pieces for me and 4 pieces for him right on the plate. And he was hungry. He was like, "Oh, can I have apple?" I was like, "Sure." And I was making the rest of the food, and he was like, "Which one's your plate?" I was like, "Why? They both have 4." He was like, "Which one's yours?" I was like, "This one." He's like, "Can I have your apple?" I was like, "No, you can eat your apple." So then he ate an apple, and I was busy making breakfast, and then I put it down on the table. And I look, okay, how many apples am I supposed to have? How many am I supposed to have? 4, okay? I go to the bathroom, because I got to pee all the time. I come back, and how many apples are on my plate? 3. And I'm like, so I look at him, and I was like, and he has 2. I was like, Jisung, how many apples am I supposed to have on my plate? He was like, 4? I was like, how many are there right now? He was like, 3? I was like, where did it go? He was like, I don't know. I don't know. I was like, Jisung, where did it go? He was like, maybe I ate it? I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, give me your apple right now. So I made him give me one. This is the principle, man. You got to learn, okay? The point is, do I teach my child how to steal apples from his mom's plate? No. You bet you I did not teach you that. Did any of you guys teach my child that? Hopefully not. The point being, you never have to teach a child anything bad. They learn how to do that without you teaching them. But you do have to teach them obedience. You do. All of you were learned obedience, okay? How many of you ever got in trouble from your parents and you said, Well, so-and-so's parent doesn't do that. Okay, every one of you has done that probably, okay? And what does your parents say? What do they all say? Well, I'm not so-and-so's mom, right? I'm not so-and-so's dad. So if you want to be their kid, go to their house or something like that, right? All Korean parents, all parents, I think, have said that before, okay? The point is, I only discipline my child because I love my child, right? Am I going to discipline someone else's child? Sometimes I wish I could, okay? Because there are some crazy kids out there right now. But do I? No, because that kid's not my child. I don't love them. If they end up a psychopath, that's their parents' fault, okay? That's not on me. But the point is, will my child end up like that? Not if I have anything to do about it. Why? Because I love my child, right? Love and obedience, they go together. Now, most of you in this room, okay, wait, I got one more parent. That's great, okay? So most of you in this room, though, you are the child, right? Or the teenager or the adult in the room, okay? You don't yet have kids. And so this kind of hits differently for you. But I want you to think back. What did you learn about obedience? What did you learn about? Because most Korean parents, I think, and maybe my generation, so maybe not so much you guys, but you know how we all got in trouble? How do we all get in trouble? How do we all get in trouble? Did you guys get in trouble this way? Memme? Nobody got memmed? No? Me and Sam. 90s kids, we got memmed, man. Okay? Did you guys get memmed? Who got memmed? Nobody? Okay, you guys did? Okay, maybe some of you guys, okay? So, and you know how they don't tell you what the word is in English, right? Because they're like, I don't want you to go to school and tell your teachers what that is. They're like, meme, I don't know what that is, okay? But the thing is, okay, so some of us, it wasn't a really good, example of discipline, okay? Some of us, we didn't have good examples. Now, I don't want you to think, oh, she's talking about, abuse is okay. That's not true, okay? There's a very important line between that. But the point being is, whatever you learned growing up, think about it. Whether it was your parents were absent, they were too busy for you. A lot of immigrant parents, that was their story. Immigrant children, parents were too busy for you. Or it was your parents were too harsh or too strict. Whatever your story is, that's important to remember. Because that becomes your grid to how you approach obedience with God. Because think about this. If obedience to someone physically in front of you, so like your father or your mother, if that is kind of messed up and it's broken, how in the world am I supposed to understand obedience to a God I cannot see? Does that make sense? The obedience that I've learned, this idea of love and discipline, or opposite, no love, neglect, whatever I've learned here, I will put it onto this with God, because God is not even visible. I can't even see him. So this is the only way I can understand what obedience to God means. This is why obedience, this passage is so critical. It's not about, I'm not just up here being obey your parents. That's not the point. The point being, why is it so important to understand how I learned obedience or didn't learn obedience? Why is that so important? Because it translates to how we listen and learn how to obey God. And living for God is obeying God, is trusting him, is following him. All of us know that. But most of us, we're like, I know that, but how come I can't do that? How come I can't do that? I don't know. Maybe one of the things we need to look at is how we learned obedience and discipline, or lack of obedience and lack of discipline from our earthly parents, because that translates to how you understand God. That's why obedience is so critical. It's the same thing. That's why that verse says, and can we go back to Ephesians 6:1 and pull up that verse? It says, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord. It doesn't say because your parents deserve it, because sometimes earthly parents make major mistakes. I know I have. There are times when your parents don't deserve to be obeyed because they've done wrong things too. He's not saying they deserve it all. He's saying, hey, you listen to them because you belong to me. And I've called you to a different standard. And I'm teaching you how to obey me by how you obey your parents. Within reason, obviously. Last week I talked about marriage, right? There's a boundary. Every relationship, there's a boundary. With parent and child, there's a boundary too. Some parents can go too far and do the wrong thing. Like, those boundaries need to be respected. The only person we can fully, totally, 100% trust and obey is who? It's God. That's it. But our parents become this like earthly framework to how to understand how to love and obey God. And so let's look at verse 2 and verse 3. It says this. This is a really famous passage. It says, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor them, things will go well for you and you will have a long life on the earth. Okay, so most of us, all of you guys, are at the age where your teenagers are up or your adult children. So obedience looks different at this age, right? Like when my child is 6, yeah, he just needs to listen to me, okay? But when he's 16, we're hopefully going to have a different relationship where there is more of a respect and an honor and a listening. Well, maybe not 16, maybe 26. But like the point being, like it's a different kind of relationship as you get older. That respect, that honor. So honor means to respect. I think Koreans are really good at that, like teaching that sometimes. Not so good, but hopefully. But what's interesting is that this passage is this commandment is the only one with a promise. All the others where God's like, the Sabbath day or like love the Lord your God, all those things, there's no promise attached to it. This is the only commandment in the whole Bible that there's a promise. It's like, if you do this, then I will do this for you. I once had a friend whose husband, he was like, took this very literally and like really very much served his family. But he would always say like, I know I'm guaranteed to live a long life. And I'd be like, great, young boo, like, okay. And he was like, it's because I take this seriously. And I thought about it, and I was like, that's actually true. Like, this is the one commandment in the whole Bible that there is a promise attached to it. And it's saying if you love and honor and respect your parents, they don't always deserve it. That doesn't mean like give them everything and waste your life. No, there's like boundaries. But he's saying if you honor and respect them, you will live a long life. You will live a prosperous life. So all of you, think about what you said to your parents this last week, how you treated them. Maybe you need to call them up again, talk to them, okay? Love and honor and respect them. Because why? Because God said, I will give you a long and prosperous life. Now, okay? So, to sum this up, can I get this sum up idea, please, on the screen? So, these parent-child relationships, this is what I want you to take away, okay? Whatever your parent-child relationship was like, okay, whether it was perfect, not perfect, really bad, really good, whatever it was, the point is that grid becomes the way you and I learn how to love and obey God. That's the grid. Now, if it's a broken grid, there is hope. We can always go back and ask the Lord to heal those things, heal those areas, because there's no one here who had a perfect childhood. No one here who had perfect parents. Nobody. So that can get healed. But we have to know there is a connection. There is a connection. That if we struggle with this area, maybe we need to ask God to heal this area first with our own relationships, with our own family. And as He heals that in our hearts, then we can move forward. That doesn't always mean reconciliation. I know there are some of us in this room that parent-child relationships have been really hard. And so there isn't reconciliation right now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to reconcile. What I'm saying is you need healing in your heart of the things that were said, the things that were done that really broke your concept of love and obedience and care. Because once that gets healed, then you can be restored with God. Does that make sense? Okay. So moving on to the next passage. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one other part. Now, this one doesn't really apply to you guys as much because none of you are parents. Some of you in this room are. But the thing is, last week it talked about, like, wives and husbands, right? It's not just, God is not just telling one side to do one thing. There's always both sides have to do both things. And so in the next passage, it says, verse 4, fathers and mothers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. So we can't expect children to obey and honor if we parents are bad at this, okay? One day, some of you in this room might be a parent. Remember what I said? When I'm a parent, I will never do this. You probably will. okay? All of us, we tend to repeat what we saw until we break that cycle ourselves, okay? So a lot of us in this room, maybe some of you guys in this room, you are disciplined out of anger a lot. Maybe all you saw was, or two spectrums, like angry discipline. Like out of anger, they disciplined you, yelled at you, whatever did to you, okay? Or the other end, you did everything to act out and nobody saw. Nobody did anything. Nobody noticed you. Those are the two different extremes. They're both not healthy, okay? I had a moment a few months ago. It was a very humbling moment as a parent where, because we always tell Jisung, like, when you're angry, like, what do you need to do? So right now we're working on, he has gotten better at, actually maybe a little bit too good, at labeling his emotions. So I'm like, okay, what do you feel right now? He's like, I'm angry. I'm like, great. That's so great. I'm really glad that you understand what you're feeling. Now let's work on like regulating that, okay? So you're not like throwing things across the room and hurting people. So we always told him, like, when you're angry, sometimes you need to take a moment, take a breath, like don't like speak out in anger, okay? Because you'll say things you regret. So we've been teaching him this, right? So then one day, it was evening, and I don't know what happened, but like my husband and I were both tired, exhausted, and he did something really, I forgot, I think he lied, I forgot what it was. It was like pretty like an obvious thing he did. And he like kept like, it was really bad. And so I got really angry, like to be honest. I was really angry, and I was fed up, I was tired, and I yelled at him. Like I yelled at him like I said I never would, okay? And then, like we resolved it, and then at the very end, like I calmed down, and I was like, Jisung, I'm sorry. And he calmed down, and then finally he goes, Mommy, like I know I did the wrong thing, but you were really angry, and that was not right. And he was crying, and then I was crying because I was like, it's true. Like, it's true. Like, what can I say? Like, he's right. Like, I shouldn't have done that out of anger. And so then the moment he hugged me, and I was like, I feel like God is disciplining me too. Like, I shouldn't have done that. And I realized, okay, this is good, healthy repair, okay? But the point being, like, whether you're a parent one day or you were a child receiving that anger, like, yeah, we shouldn't do things out of anger. We should not parent out of anger. We should not discipline out of anger. And yet most of us have experienced it. And I'm sorry, but if you become a parent, most of you will do it too. And so the most important thing is, how do you repair that relationship? Because guess what? What you learn from your parents about repairing a relationship, that's exactly what you put onto God. Does that make sense? So if you learned, oh, I do something wrong, I could never like repair that with my parents. I have to hide it. Or or they don't even see it. They neglect it. Whatever it is, that's what we literally put onto God more often than you think. And so how we learn how to repair a broken relationship, that's so critical. Because going throughout your life as a Christian, you will have moments where your relationship with God feels broken, where we've done something that breaks the relationship. And so how do we repair? I want you to think about it. When you feel far from God, how do you repair? What does that look like for you? Do you keep running away? Do you keep kind of like forgetting about God? Do you feel like you can't come to him until you're like perfect and clean? Like all of us have a pattern. Where does that pattern come from? Think about it. All of us. When you've done something that you know breaks relationship with God, what do? And where does that pattern come from? And why? That's important for each of us to know. That God never disciplines out of anger, ever. He always disciplines out of love. Why does he discipline us? Because he loves us. I will not discipline someone else's child because I don't love that child. I don't care if he's psychopath or not. That's not my problem. But my child being psychopath, that's my problem because I love my child, okay? I don't want him to be psychopath. So I'm going to do what I can to like guide him in the right direction because I love him. In the same way, the Lord loves you. And because he cares for you, he steps in. But oftentimes, we respond to him like we do to our earthly parents, who maybe didn't do a good job sometimes. And so I want you to be aware of that. And this leads me to my next main idea, which is this. All parent-child relationships, what they do is they teach us love and obedience, which translates to understanding God's love and how to obey him. They're all connected. If we're having a hard time learning or experiencing his love, we have a hard time learning how to trust God, listen to him, follow him. I want you to look back at those patterns. We don't blame them like, Mom, the reason I'm a bad Christian is because of you. No, you're old enough to own your own life now and to own your own mistakes. But the point being, sometimes they're connected more than we think. Those first places we learned obedience and love, that translates to how we understand his love and his obedience. Next section, I'll kind of whiz through this part. This is about working relationships. So most of you in this room, who works in this room? Who works? Like works at a job, gets paid. Raise your hands. Okay, like a third of you. Okay, who goes to school full-time? That's your job. School, full-time. Raise your hands. Ready, set, go. Okay, school, full-time. Okay, that's your job. Okay, so now verse 5 and 6. This was a different time, different era, where there were slaves in that time. But here we see in this passage, he's talking about like work now. He's saying, so slaves, workers, those of you who work, obey your earthly masters, your superiors, your bosses, your teachers. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. Try to please them all the time, not just when they're watching. As slaves of Christ, do the will of God with all in your heart. See, again, obedience is a common theme. Why? Again, obedience is what it means to follow and live for God. Living for God takes obedience to him. But where do we learn obedience on this earth? From our parents and also in the workplace. That's where we learn them. So if we don't do it well here, we can't do it well here. Does that make sense? Okay. So working relationships, different kind of obedience, but same thing. Serve them, love them as you would serve Christ. How many of you have a job where your boss is not always there? Okay. So it's kind of great. And, okay, so I used to work at a university where I had about 70 students who worked for me every semester, and they were all off-site, okay? So every once in a blue moon, I'd stop by those sites unannounced, okay? And I used to be a student working, so I understand what it's like, okay? So I'd walk into the place, and automatically you would see, like, it was like a wave, okay? You would see, like, everyone's, like, kind of slouched, and then I come in, they're like, they're so into their work and like, like I think all of us have experienced that, right? Like your boss comes in and like suddenly you're like, oh shoot, I was watching this, but I shouldn't have, whatever it is, okay? All of us have done that. The point being, why do we work and why do we do those things well? 2 reasons. A, we do it not for our boss, not just for them, not just for the paycheck, but we do it as a reflection of the God that we follow. And because you are a Christian in that space. And so who you are, how you work, the attitude you have, the way you treat others, that's a reflection of the God you follow. And so we are witnesses of that wherever we go in those workplaces. Verse 7 and 8, it says, work with enthusiasm as though you're working for the Lord, not for people, because he rewards everything you and I do. Everything. Whether you're a student, maybe you hate math, but you're like, I have to do the math test. Okay, do your best. And if that's a D, that's okay. But do your best. Why? Because that is the attitude you and I take before God. That he's giving you the life you have. He's given you the opportunities you have. He's given you the schools that you've been placed in. He's given you all these things for a reason. And so you want to steward that well. Stewarding that well. Last verse, verse 9. It's also the same thing. If you ever become in a position to be a supervisor, here's this. Treat your workers well. Don't threaten them. Remember to do to them as you would do to Christ. The idea being it goes both ways. It goes both ways. So to sum up, work relationships also teach us obedience, which translates into understanding obedience with God. Do you see a theme here? Obedience. That's what it means to follow Jesus. But we often struggle, often because our early experience with obedience with our parents, or now as students, as working people, we didn't really have a good idea of that. And so therefore, it doesn't really translate well with the Lord. I want to pull up our questions for today. And it's really just pulling back from what we just talked about, but of like, what have been your childhood experiences? What have been your work experiences? How does that translate to how you understand obeying God, knowing God, loving God? Can I have the praise team come up? So all of these various relationships, can I have the lights turned down on the side? Thanks. Family relationships, work relationships, they all reflect a way for us to understand how to obey God. If you don't remember anything from today, that's fine. But one thing I ask of you is this. Remember, living for God means what? Means obedience. And I want you to think back, where did I learn obedience? Where was it hard? Where was it good? And how does that translate to how I see God now? Can we all stand? All of us have work to do, to undo, to redo. Maybe we've had really broken relationships with our parents. Maybe it's been like kind of okay. They're just like fine. My parents are fine. But wherever you are in that spectrum, I want you to ask yourself, how does that translate to obeying God? How does that translate to knowing God? Again, living as a Christian means learning how to obey and follow and trust him because he's good. And as we sing this song today, it's a good Father. You all know it, but it's a really important song to be like, you know what? No matter what happened with my parents, no matter what happened with these various relationships in my life, the point is that he is good, and he is not like our earthly fathers, our earthly mothers. God is not like those broken relationships in our lives. He can heal those broken relationships, and he wants to heal that with his love and his joy and his goodness for you and I. And so as we sing this song, I want you to, especially the chorus where it says, you're a good Father. It's who you are. It's who he is. He's not good because of what you do. He's not good because of what you don't do. He's good because that's who he is. That's who he is. And we are loved by him, and that's who we are, ones that are loved by him. Let's sing this together. Sing, I've heard 1,000 stories.
I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the
that you thought about this message, whether it was like old memories or hard things that you remember, or just realizing that you didn't really have a very deep relationship with your parents. And so therefore, it's really hard to get deep with God. Whatever connections you've made right now, let's bring that to God and say, God, this is what my stuff is. I have issues because my parents did these things and I didn't really, I don't know how to be loved by you. Or whatever it may be, fill in the blank. But whatever it is, I want you to bring that to him and say, God, I just give this to you. And I ask that you heal me from this so that I could know you deeper. I could know you better. Those of us parents in the room, we're called to repent of the ways that we didn't parent well and ask God to heal those areas with our children. So let's pray together right now for those relationships in our lives and ask him to heal us. declare that to be true. No matter what our earthly relationships with our parents have been like, whether it's been good or not so good or in between, maybe it's that we can't go very deep with them. We can't share our hearts with them. Maybe they weren't there for us. Maybe we felt abandoned by them. Maybe we only saw their angry discipline. That's all we saw. We didn't see love. Whatever it is that our experience has been, we bring it to the foot of the cross today, and we ask that you would heal our hearts. Because, God, we want to know your love. We want to obey you, live for you. But oftentimes, those experiences hold us back. So we ask for freedom in those places. And we ask that we would walk closer to you, know you more, learn to love and obey you, because you are perfect and you are good. And we don't have to be afraid of you. You can be known. So God, we thank you. We pray all these things in your son's precious name. Amen.